All right. So we could have all these complex shapes in terms of the orbitals for the eye sockets, the nasal cavity, the maxilla, the mandible, which are the jaws. But we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to keep it simple. So if you'll notice in 3D, let's go ahead and move this up. If we look underneath, this jaw shape makes a kind of horseshoe or a magnet shape, and it goes upward and meets just under the cheekbones there, right? It's not as wide as the cheekbones, but it's kind of in there, right? So what we're going to do is take that magnet shape and simplify it and then attach it to our egg shape. So let's take a look at that over here. You can clearly see that if you do a draw through line, we'll do just a dotted line here in this perspective, it's a curved magnet shape. But we're just going to make it solid, right? So we're not going to get into the details just yet of the actual complex forms, but for now, we're just going to keep this as a simple shape. So another way to look at that shape is if you have a rectangle mixed with a cylinder, you have our shape that we're going to make. So I'm going to do that in the same perspective in my demonstration here. At least close enough. Now, if you can render a rectangle in a cylinder, you can pretty much do this pretty easily. So let's do that without the egg shape for now. Make a new layer underneath. Let's pick any value. It's around 50% gray. Let's fill that in. And remember, cylinders will have a core shadow, so I'm going to make that go along the form of the cylinder here. And just using the round brush to shade that in a little bit. And I'm going to actually grab a little bit of light value coming from the side here just to help indicate that form a little bit better. All right. I'm not going to render the top part because that part we're going to merge with the egg. So let's put the egg above it. And now all we have to do, just to start understanding the form a little bit better, is connect them. So this core shadow of the cylinder, we're going to take that up and just take it all the way up to that kind of cranial shape there. Now, if you can get really good at making this shape in 3D and render it, you'll have a much better understanding for painting heads and faces from any angle, any lighting scenario. So practice this a lot. All right, so this would pretty much be a extended core shadow. Let's bring up the cylinder of this. And pretty quickly, we have the start of the human skull. So if we take the reference away and just go from scratch, and all we had to do was draw an egg shape and a magnet shape, you could pretty much set up a bunch of skulls really easily. So we got an egg shape with the side of a thing like that. We have the magnet going up as a cylinder, so on and so forth. And as we add some value from the top, maybe it's top lighting in this case, it starts to take on the form of a human skull. Now, to kind of just show what you can do with that, knowing that the cranium does something like this, the eye sockets go here, the nasal cavity is there, and then the empty space between the jaw goes there, and then the jaw could come out like this. And everything else is just going to fall into place. Now, the most complex part of the human skull, I believe, is the cheekbone, because it has this kind of strange organicness to it. You know, it's not just a clear cut, oh, that's just a cylinder, but we'll get to that. So at this point, I would suggest practicing just the egg and just the cylinder magnet shape from different angles. So if we want to do a bottom view looking up, so we have the egg shape doing that, right? And just so that it's not confusing, I'll do the magnet over here. So the bottom side, something like that, extends upward, and it's doing this. And you just slide that right in. And now if we just shade that in real quick, you very easily and very quickly get the form in perspective as a setup for a human head. Now, in this case, as I mentioned earlier, the cheekbones will come out further from this angle especially, and we'll, of course, get to that. But just to give you an idea of what you can do with this, you know, that will just be a kind of easy setup for a human head. Now, I should mention that the lower jaw does come out further like this, and then there's a chin there. But for now, we just want to focus on the simplified version for the sake of having a good setup for the rest of the lesson regarding learning the skull. I'm just going to do one more, this time starting with the magnet. I already did that angle. Okay, let's go ahead and put a egg shape across that center line. If you have a hard time drawing in perspective, I highly recommend studying perspective, obviously, and check out Scott Robertson's content on that. That's who I learned from when I was at Art Center. His books on how to draw and how to render are very helpful for learning three-dimensional rendering and creating illusions with line and form. And just to have fun with this one real quick before we move on, if I do lay in a quick indication of the rest of the features, you can see if I lower the opacity, it's just a very straightforward, clear setup to draw a head right on top. And it's really great for concepting. If you want to do a whole bunch of iterations of concept art for heads and characters, doing a bunch of these basic shapes, and you can change the sizes and proportions, and then coming back over them to sketch features, which we will cover in a later lesson, you can concept very quickly. Not that it's always about speed, but it is helpful. If you can do it slowly, you can do it quickly. So that's why we're doing all of this step by step, carefully and slowly.